This is why you have to learn to think for yourself. This is why it's so important to know these fallacies and to be able to recognize them and spot them, because if you can't think for yourself, you'll fall for it. And that's why people do these things, because they work. You guys, they work. The advertisers do it, a million times a day. Different organizations do this a million times. Like, people do this in relationships. It's because it works on people until you start to grow your EQ and you develop some self-awareness and others' awareness, and you start to learn about this stuff. And then guess what? Magically, it doesn't work on you anymore. It doesn't work on you anymore because you see it for what it is.
Welcome to the EQ for Entrepreneurs podcast. Like most business owners, you already know you need good business and marketing strategies to scale and be profitable. But at some point, you've hit the dreaded wall where you feel stuck and frustrated. EQ for Entrepreneurs is for business owners and leaders who are honest enough to admit that they just might be the ones holding their business back and are brave enough to change that.
We're Noble and Kathy, and every week we're having candid conversations about all things emotional intelligence and how growing that has allowed us to get out of our own way and is radically transforming both our businesses and our personal lives. This is the secret sauce strategy for modern entrepreneurs who are tired of hustling without seeing results and want to grow a business and a life that they love.
Welcome back to the EQ for Entrepreneurs podcast. We are so thankful that you are one of the smart entrepreneurs, leaders, or influencers who is doing the work to grow their emotional intelligence. So it's just me again today, back for part 2. I got to tell you, we had such a big response to last week's episode on the dark side of emotional intelligence. There's, so much response that we decided, okay, we need to do a part 2 today. Now, for those of you who are new to our podcast, here's how it works. Here's how it works around here. We do a long episode on Mondays, and then we release a shorter episode on Thursdays, which is usually kind of sharing a peek behind the curtain into our own personal EQ growth journey, because we believe that implementation is just as important as information. Typically on our Monday episodes, we're teaching something, which is great. You're going to need to learn a lot of new information on your EQ journey, but it's not enough to just learn. You also have to put it into practice in order to own it, in order for it to change you. So that's the difference between our Monday and Thursday episodes. So last Monday, I talked about how some people use emotional intelligence skills to control and manipulate, and what it feels like when that's happening to you. But I realized after we released it, we knew that it was only part of the story, and I didn't feel like I really prepared you for how to objectively recognize control and manipulation. So we're going to dive into that today. I'm going to give you the one thing that's almost always present in a manipulative environment, and I'm going to give you lots of examples of tactics that controlling people use so you can start to recognize them. And here's the thing. I know this is a deep topic. I know this is one that you might not want to face, so you might not want to hear about. You might not want to know, oh, is this happening to me? Or maybe you're in a place where you're experiencing pain, and so you realized, no, I need to know about this. I need to understand this. I need to dive into this. Wherever you're at, I'm glad you're here. This is important, and this can help you. It can help your business, and it can also help you help other people who may find themselves here. So before we dive in, real quickly, I recently read an article on about EQ, which, as you know, emotional intelligence, we use EQ, which stands for emotional quotient, and emotional intelligence. We use those two phrases interchangeably, so we mean the same thing. So on entrepreneur.com, they had an article about why it's so necessary for today's leaders and entrepreneurs to learn and grow their EQ. I'm going to include the link to this article in the show notes if you want to check it out later. But here's an excerpt. This is what they say. An emotionally intelligent person is someone who lives and works well. As a leader within your organization, you should make it your goal to evolve the company's emotional intelligence. Emotionally intelligent teams are healthier and more productive. They communicate better. They work toward goals with enthusiasm and focus, and they have stronger relationships among teammates. Thus, your company succeeds and employee retention soars. As a leader, the best thing you can do for your company is to prioritize up-leveling your emotional intelligence. This won't benefit just your work, by the way, since up-leveling your emotional intelligence could be called becoming a healthily functioning human. All your relationships will benefit from taking your emotional quotient to the next level. That is good stuff right there, folks. Whether you're just starting out in business or you've been a business owner for years, this is the foundational skill for a successful, healthy business and life. And again, we're so glad you're here. And I just got to say, we have been working so hard behind the scenes to put together a framework for teaching EQ to business owners. From what we've seen, there's nobody doing this yet. There may be other people teaching EQ to individuals, maybe to families, even to corporate entities, larger companies, but I have yet to see someone teaching it in a way that's specific to the solopreneurs, the small business owners, the digital entrepreneurs, etc. That's what we're creating. And if I dare say so myself, it's going to be good. It is going to be transformative, yet super practical, so that you can get on with running and scaling your business in an even more healthy and successful way. So stay tuned. Stay tuned. We're working on it. It's coming. All right, so last week, I talked about how sometimes emotional intelligence is taught and used as a tool to control and manipulate other people to do what you want them to do. And sometimes there's bad or malicious intent behind it, no doubt. But a lot of times, and we see this a lot in the entrepreneur world, people do this because they just want to win so badly. And guess what? These tactics work. They do. They're able to get people to buy in, to make decisions, to take certain actions that benefit them, and they get that win that they so desperately want. But what they don't realize is that regardless of your intentions, doing things that control and manipulate will eventually backfire. People get sick and tired of it. It becomes repulsive to them. They finally wake up and they end up wanting nothing to do with you. That is, the ones who wake up. And there's going to definitely be a certain segment of society of people who will continue under that forever, which quite frankly is really sad because they don't even realize how they're losing themselves. And this, my friends, is just one reason why developing your EQ is so stinking important. The higher your EQ is, the more you'll be able to recognize these tactics and avoid them at all costs. Okay, so first of all, here is the one thing that is almost always present in a manipulative environment, and it's consequences. Okay, now wait, I know consequences, that's part of life. Of course it is, but hear me out here. Consequences, repercussions for your decisions. Now, I'm not talking about natural consequences. I mean other consequences that the other person puts on you if you don't do what it is that they're wanting you to do. Let me give you an example and hopefully show you what I mean and why this is so inappropriate. So when you have a child, parents, you know this. When you have a child, you tell them certain things to do, not to do. Don't stick your finger in the light socket. Don't touch the hot stove. And there's two types of consequences that you'll typically give them if they don't listen to you. I should say that they'll typically get if they don't listen to you. They're going to get natural consequences, and there will probably be some imposed consequences. Okay, so the natural consequences would be a burned finger. You touch the stove, you burn your finger, it hurts, right? There's pain that came as a direct and very natural result of that decision. Now, imposed consequences are different. By the way, none of us are exempt from natural consequences. That's life. Right? That's life. We're all going to have natural consequences. You don't pay the mortgage on your home? Guess what? You're going to get kicked out of it at some point. You don't pay your car payment? They're going to repossess it. You don't mow your lawn? You might get fined. You don't clean your house? You're going to get bugs. So these types of things are just natural consequences for our decisions. Okay. But There's another kind of consequences, and those are imposed consequences. Imposed consequences are different. That comes from somebody else, right? So in the instance of the parent and the child, with the child touching the stove, so the parent may scold the child for not listening, maybe put them in timeout, and very likely express some sort of emotional disapproval. Now, if they're wise, they may just let that burned finger be enough. But we all know that as a parent, it is our responsibility. We are responsible for our children. And it's part of our responsibility to teach and train our children how to navigate, how to relate to, and how to be safe in this world. And for that, we impose consequences for wrong choices in behavior. Now, I want to point out the key word in all of that: responsibility. As parents, we are responsible for our children. That's part of parenting. However, in an adult-to-adult situation, we are not responsible for the other person. And we should not be trying to parent another adult, right? When we are putting consequences on another adult, that is us taking responsibility for their actions and for them learning or not learning something. And that's parenting. And there's a book called Changes That Heal. It's on the resource list. If you guys go back to episode 27, you can get my resource list, eqforentrepreneurs.com/27. Changes That Heal. It's by Dr. Henry Cloud. It has a whole section about this idea of adulthood. And he describes this when there's not an equal adult relationship. It's kind of being a one-up, one-down relationship where one person, actually both people, see one of the persons in the relationship as up, or the more knowledgeable person, the person with more control or influence, and then the person who's in the one down position in the relationship doesn't have the same say, doesn't have the same influence. And the person in the one up position uses that position to keep the other person doing what they want by withholding approval, right? So here's some of the different consequences, right, that may happen if the person in the one down position doesn't do what they wanted them to do. They might withhold approval. They might remove emotional love or support. They may make disparaging comments. They may ignore them. There may be some kind of social repercussions, right? There's a lot of different ways that this can show up, but the underlying theme, understand the principle here. The underlying theme is that they're giving some sort of imposed emotional or social consequence when the person in the one down position doesn't do exactly what they want them to do. Here's the deal. As adults, we get to live life and we get to learn through the natural consequences of our decisions. And when another adult tries to impose emotional or social consequences onto us because of our decisions, there's a good chance manipulation is in play. So that's the one thing that you can look for. Are there consequences to either doing? Are there good emotional consequences to, extra bennies to doing what they want? And are there bad consequences, emotional consequences to not doing what they want? That's typically going to be in play in an emotional, in a manipulative or controlling environment. Okay, I want to give you some examples of different tactics that are sometimes used to control and manipulate. Okay, because you can recognize, they have names. We can name these things. You guys know we're so big on naming. Like, if you name your feelings and emotions, if you name what's happening now, you can start to look at them differently and work on them differently, and you can view them outside of your feelings. So it's so funny. Our daughter, who's just finishing 7th grade, she had a class subject this year called reasoning. And one of the books that she had to read and go through was all about fallacies. So fallacies are wrong thinking. And it was all about how to recognize the wrong thinking, what they're called, how to spot it, right? And why it's wrong. So I thought that was amazing. Like, how awesome is that? That was one of the things that she had to learn in school this year, because, oh my gosh, once you learn these, you will see them everywhere. I promise you're going to start to see them. You're going to start to hear them. You're going to recognize them when you listen to the news. Oh yes. When you listen to the news, when you watch advertisements and see commercials, when you hear people talk, like, yeah, you're going to see this a lot. So I'm going to share a couple of these. One whole section in her book was on propaganda, right? Propaganda are the ways that people try to get you to believe or to do something. And there's a whole bunch of them. So I'm going to share a few of those things here. And I think you'll really start to get a feel for what this looks like and what this sounds like. And just, we do have a journal page for this episode. So just go to eqforentrepreneurs.com/2929, and we will have that link in the show notes. I will include this list in the show notes if you want to be able to have it and refer back to. And since I mentioned it, I can give you in the show notes or on that download, I'll give you the title of that book. It's a fun, cute little book. Again, we're doing it with a 7th grader, but it was instructive to me as well. Okay, here's number 1. It's called Appeal to Fear. Appeal to fear is when someone makes you fear the consequences of not doing what they want you to do. This could be really subtle. It could be through deceit or exaggeration, or it could be outright threats or verbal abuse, right? Here's the reason why it works. It's human nature to fear the unknown. And this method preys on that tendency because fear is a very strong emotion, right? So this is maybe an example would be in advertising. Just think about what's going to happen if you don't have this car insurance. Or what is the one about mayhem, right? Before mayhem happens to you. You guys have probably all seen that one. Well, that's an appeal to fear because nobody wants their car wrecked like that. So that's just an example. Number 2, appeal to pity. When someone tries to make us do something only because we pity them or we pity something associated with them. Here's an example. Let's say that this man is speeding in his vehicle. He gets pulled over by the police, and the police looks up his record and finds out he has had 5 recent speeding tickets in the recent months. And this man starts getting all sad and giving the officer some pity. Please don't give me this. If you give me this, they're going to take away my driver's license and I won't be able to work and I won't be able to, feed my kids and feed my wife and take care of my home. He's giving an appeal to pity. He's claiming pity, and he wants to have pity on him because he'll lose his jobs and his kids won't be able to eat, right? But if he really cared about his kids, he wouldn't have been getting all these speeding tickets to begin with. So sometimes appeal to pity is just to make you feel guilty. Guilt is a very strong emotion, just like fear is. Another, the appeal to pity that my daughter recognized, she said, Mommy, it's like those animal commercials where they want you to send money or adopt animals. And I said, yeah, that's exactly right. Is it a sad situation? Yeah, but they're definitely using appeal to pity. Now, is that bad? Is it bad? I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll tell you when it's bad and when it's not bad. Let me get through my list first. Okay. Number 3, for your own good. For your own good. That's saying, I am doing this to help you, right? I am doing this to help you. This allows them to look like they are the morally superior person while you are left having to do whatever they're telling you to do. Whether or not it is actually the best for you. I saw a recent quote by C.S. Lewis that I thought, oh yeah, this is a great example of this for your own good fallacy. As he says this, of all tyrannies, a tyranny exercised for the good of its victims may be the most oppressive. Those who torment us for our own good will torment us without end, for they do so with the approval of their own conscience. Wow. All right, that's number 3. Number 4, bandwagon. Okay, bandwagon is saying, look at all these other people who are doing XYZ. What's wrong with you? You should be doing XYZ too. This is really nothing more than peer pressure, right? It's that everybody's doing it. Everybody's buying this kind of laptop for school. Your kids need it, right? For example, false urgency is number 5. False urgency. This is when nothing more than a time or a size limit is given as a reason to do what someone else wants you to do. Right? So hurry on down. They're only available for 48 more hours, for example, because the issue isn't really the issue. Okay, so they may be only available for 48 hours, but the real issue is, do I want that thing? Do I need that thing? Is it good for me? Is it what I even need right now or I'm looking for? So that's false urgency. And really what it does is it preys on our FOMO. It preys on our fear of missing out, because it's not about whether we even want to do the certain thing. It's about missing out. All right, number 6, repetition. This one is repeating a message loudly and very often in the hopes that you will believe it. Sometimes you've heard it this way: the more you tell a certain story, the more believable it becomes. Have you ever found that in your life where as you get older, maybe when you're an adult, you find out that something that you were told over and over as a kid isn't true? Well, why did you believe it? It's because you probably heard it a lot over. Maybe it was the tooth fairy. Maybe it was Santa. I don't know. But repetition, if you say the same thing loud enough and long enough, people will believe it. All right, number 7, snob appeal. Snob appeal. This is when someone tries to persuade us that doing their thing, whatever it is, will make you better than other people or will make you stand out from everybody else. So it appeals to our desire to be raised up to a higher class or status. This also carries with it the idea that doing this certain thing will make you better than everyone else, and that, they're just not as knowledgeable or not as special. Here's the reality, though. There's nothing new under the sun. There's nothing new under the sun. And yes, while there's expert in every field, that doesn't make them better than anyone else. And guess what? What somebody else has learned, you can learn too. And you can probably learn it for free on the internet, quite frankly, in this day and age. So anyways, that's snob appeal. All right, number 8. Exclusivity. This is kind of similar to snob appeal. It's a little different, though. Exclusivity is the idea that this, whatever this is, right? Typically, this is whatever the person in the one-up position is wanting you to do or think or say or feel. So it's the idea that this is the only or one of the very few places to have true success, or the only place that's doing things right, or the only place that's thinking the right way. Because of this, there's no valid reason to leave. And typically people who leave will have their character questioned or maligned, rather than looking to see if there is a valid reason to leave. Because see, when you believe that this one person or this one group has all the answers and knows all the answers, why would you ever leave that? Why would you ever walk away? You must be crazy. Well, not necessarily. Again, like I just said, there is no one person that knows everything and that they're the only person in the world that knows it. So that's why this is what I told my daughter. And I got to tutor that 7th grade class that was going through this book this year. And over we came back to this discussion of, this is why you have to learn to think for yourself. This is why it's so important to know these fallacies and to be able to recognize them and spot them, because if you can't think for yourself, you'll fall for it. And that's why people do these things, because they work. You guys, they work. The advertisers do it, a million times a day. Different organizations do this a million times. Like, people do this in relationships. It's because it works on people until you start to grow your EQ and you develop some self-awareness and others' awareness, and you start to learn about this stuff. And then guess what? Magically, it doesn't work on you anymore. It doesn't work on you anymore because you see it for what it is. You can think for yourself. Okay, number 9. I got a few more left on my list here. Love bombing. Love bombing. It's an attempt to influence another person through over-the-top or unnatural displays of affection or attention. A lot of times it can feel like somebody is way too friendly, way too fast, or a relationship just seems like, wow, that got deep quick, or, something like that. And typically love bombing is used to create loyalty and obedience in somebody because you feel, oh, they love me, they get me. All right, number 10, appeal to tradition, or on the other hand, appeal to high tech. So what this means is this is when we're encouraged to take some action because it's associated with things of the past, tradition and nostalgia, or we're encouraged to take some action because it's the latest thing, right? This is the newest thing, the high technology, new, whatever the thing is. The issue with this is it doesn't address whether or not it's actually the best thing. Just because your secret recipe was handed down through generations from Italy, it might not be any good, right? Who knows? And same thing, just because something is the latest and newest gadget or concept doesn't mean it's the best thing. So it's just learning to see through the things that are kind of being told to us and sold to us to really just think, well, but does that even make sense for me or does it not? Number 11, confusion. This is when a person attempts to confuse you to gain an advantage. It could be through using a vocabulary that you're not used to, by speaking faster, or consistently denying something that you know to be true. Basically, it's kind of making you question yourself. Or it's just saying a whole bunch of stuff to sound smart so that you believe the person. All right, number 12, reciprocity. Reciprocity is our desire to do something for or give back to someone who's done something for us. It creates obligation. We feel obligated to them. And there are some people who will exploit that. They will give you something or they will go above and beyond to do something for you so that you now feel obligated back to them. Okay, number 13, passive aggressive behavior. So this is the display of negative feelings or resentment, maybe aggression in a very passive manner. It could be through consistent procrastination, avoidance, subtle comments, backhanded compliments, derogatory comments, or actions that somehow show their displeasure. This is just somebody just kind of passively letting you know they're not happy with what you did. And they're not going to come right out and say it, but you will definitely feel it and you'll definitely know. Okay, lastly, this is my last one. Number 14, special knowledge. This is so somebody can convince you that they have secrets that you can only learn through them. And without them, you are destined to be in the dark, right? And again, this often makes you mistrust yourself or distrust yourself because you start to trust because that person has this quote unquote special knowledge or secret knowledge that only they know. They hold that over you. And it makes you think, well, I can't make these decisions for myself, or I would never know how to do what they know how to do. And so it transfers your dependence and reliance onto that person. Now, there's more. I could keep going, but I feel like you're starting to get the picture. 14 is probably enough for right now, rather than giving a whole exhaustive list. But I'm telling you, it's fascinating. It's fascinating studying this stuff. We had so much, my 7th graders, they got it, you guys. They got it. So I know you can too. Now, here's a very important distinction, okay? So hear me out on this. Not all of these tactics are necessarily bad, okay? If you think about it, most of the commercials and the ads that you hear will be using one of these tactics. Now, some of them I think are bad, but not all of them, okay? So if you think about commercials and ads, they're trying to convince you that you need what they are selling. And that's just advertising. And here's the difference, though. Here's what makes it, here's the differentiator that makes it like just kind of advertising and can get it, and then getting into negative territory is this. It becomes harmful when someone imposes emotional consequences on you or social consequences on you for not choosing to do what they want to do. That is the difference. Think about it. If it's just a TV commercial or an ad on YouTube, you can skip it and nothing happens. Nothing happens. That's the difference. That's okay, fine. Let them use whatever they're going to use. They have the right to use that tactic if they want to use the tactic. However, when somebody's using it on you and you try to skip their ad and they come back with some kind of emotional consequence for you, ding, 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 we may have emotional control and manipulation happening or trying to happen. So this is why it's so important to grow your own emotional intelligence, because if you're not in touch with how you're feeling, you will miss it. If you don't have the self-awareness to say, oh, that felt weird, you'll just go along. You'll just go along with it. If you're not able to read the other person's actions and see that they're exerting emotional consequences onto you, you'll miss it. And you'll be way more susceptible to being controlled and manipulated by that person. EQ, emotional intelligence, will help you build that self and others awareness. And you will learn to have more control of your own thoughts, of your own feelings, of your own actions, all of which makes you less susceptible to falling for these tactics. So by the way, like I said before, if you want to download this list, just go to eqforentrepreneurs.com/29, the number 29, and you can get it there. So I guess I want to hear from you. We've already gotten some great feedback on this little, series we're doing on the dark side of EQ. Tell me what do you think? Has it helped you? Let us know. Depending on what we hear back from you, we just might do a part 3, because I still have to tell you. I still feel like I got to tell you what to do. Like, what do you do if you are like, oh my gosh, yes, all these things or some of these things or whatever, I'm recognizing. What do I do if you find yourself here? So let us know. Go to eqforentrepreneurs.com/ask-away. That's a way for you to send us a little message, and we get it. We read it. And, there's a very good chance that we will do a part 3 to wrap up the series and tell you what to do. If you would like to join our free Facebook community of entrepreneurs who are seriously leveling up their businesses by growing their EQ, we'd love to have you. So just search on Facebook for the Emotionally Intelligent Entrepreneurs Facebook group. And if you're getting value from this podcast, it would mean so much to us if you would subscribe and leave a review. That's it. We'll talk to you next week.